Let's dive into this stuff. Let's begin with a teaching problem. What are you struggling with? What do you struggle with in the classroom? Very often it's a question of what works, or what works better. Trying to teach a particular subject, what's the best way to do it? Hey, I've just come up with an idea. Will this work better than the other ideas that I've had? Sometimes it's a question of what is it? What does it look like? One of my very, very favorite teaching moments, and I would recommend wholeheartedly that you do this. When I was doing those simulations that I talked about at the very beginning of my talk, I was working with a group of mostly freshman students in an introductory class. And I had two upper-level senior students who were working with me as sort of teaching assistants. I really don't have graduate students the way you guys do here, so I often use a lot of my advanced undergrads in those roles. And I took my two assistants out for breakfast one day, and I said to them, okay, here's the question. I want you to think about what we're asking our students to do. Can you do it better than our students? They said, yeah. Right? They're pathetic little freshmen. We're seniors. We can do this stuff better than them. I said, can I do it better than you? They said, sure. You're a professor. You've been doing this for many years. We're just undergrads. You can do it better than us. I said, okay. What do you know that our freshmen don't? And what do I know that you don't know? That was a hell of a good conversation. That was a hell of a good conversation because it really gets down to demonstrating that a lot of what our goal is to say, what does expert thinking look like? What does it look like? And how do we help others to get there? And sometimes it's a vision of the possible. People say this can't be done. Go into the phone booth, put on your cape, come out flying, and show what you can actually manage to do. So designing an inquiry. What types of evidence can you find? Just highlight some of these very briefly. Student work. I've done a lot of work over the years where I actually take student work, and I'm not talking just, the read it, grade it, prepare for the students to whine about the grade type of analysis of student work, but actually reading through it, coming up with coding sheets, thinking, what do I want them to do? Testing, how well have they done it? I've used student journals and reflection papers. Feels a little soft. It is a little soft, no doubt about it. But asking students, tell me what your experience was like learning this material, gives you a better picture of what the student experience is like learning the material than anything you can come up with. I've already learned this stuff. I want to know what it's like for them to learn it. My own reflections. I keep a teaching blog. It is a private blog. Nobody else sees it but me. Told one of my students about this one. She said, oh, it's so cute. Bernstein keeps a diary. I said, no, it's a blog. It's totally different. It's electronic. But I use that as a way for myself to kind of go back and, you ever have that moment in class where you really need to process what just went on in the classroom? That's where I do it. Helps me thinking about this stuff. Videotape, audio tape, what you see in class. Talking to and working with your students. As I said before, nobody understands learning the material in your class as well as the people you are asking to learn the material in your class. Bring them in. Bring them in. And teaching then can progress. We should all be good teachers. Good teaching should be a minimum, and if we're not good teachers, we should work to get there. Then there's scholarly teaching. We should be reading the journals about education. We should be learning more. We should be following. What do people who are in our field have to say about teaching and learning? And then, of course, is the scholarship of teaching and learning, bringing it to that next step, gathering data, testing ideas about student learning, and bringing it and going public with it. Something from one of the papers that I've done that I think Alon mentioned earlier, right? Good teaching, scholarly teaching, scholarship of teaching and learning. And in the model that Sarah Ginsberg and I created and worked on with this, what we suggested is that it really goes around in a circle. Because when you do the scholarship of teaching and learning, you will learn where you succeeded, and you will learn what are those areas where maybe I should be diving in a little bit more, and maybe what I should be doing is thinking a little more about how to teach this area, which sends you spiraling around. In one of the pieces Sarah and I wrote, we talked about the Faculty Development Center, and we used the analogy of a Faculty Development Center as a teaching hospital. I feel awkward framing this in a room full of people, many of whom have worked in hospitals, but Sarah's in special ed, so she gave me permission to use this analogy, where she said that at a teaching hospital, you've got some of the most advanced and difficult cases. And the work that you do to unpack those difficult cases feeds back into the regular, everyday treatment. That it really becomes this iterative model where the advanced work you're doing feeds back into the basic care. The basic care you're doing often provides the opportunity to study things at a more advanced level. A faculty development center, to my mind, and I'd be interested to talk more with Matt about this, is helping faculty who struggle in the classroom, but it is also ideally helping with faculty who really want to use faculty development almost as a center for advanced study in teaching and learning. I know when I had my fellowship at the Carnegie Foundation, Lee Shulman always talked about Carnegie as a center for advanced study in teaching and learning. He was always very proud of the fact that the Center for Advanced Studies in the Behavioral Sciences was down the hill from the Carnegie Center for the Advancement of Teaching. He'd always say, after you master that behavioral stuff, then you can go up the hill to the really complicated stuff. Why should we do this kind of work? I believe this. I'll repeat. One more time. Costs me nothing to put it on 3 slides, but it does highly emphasize a point here. As I said earlier, you are training professionals. You are training professionals who are coming out a year or 2 after they sit in your classroom, and they are serving other people. Even more so than what I do, I think it creates an obligation on the part of many of you who are doing this kind of work to really think about, how do we feed this back into what our students do? How do we feed this back into their practice? So why do we do this? I think there are 3 reasons. They are institutional, disciplinary, and personal. Let me move through these. So where do conversations about teaching and learning take place on campus? Physically, of course, ideally at the Starbucks. You have a Starbucks on campus? Of course, yeah. It's the law. It's the law. It's the law. Lee Shulman always said, if you find enough people who are interested in teaching and learning and provide enough food, good things will happen. But I don't just mean physically where do we discuss it. What are the opportunities? What are the times in which we discuss it? I assume all of the programs in your college go through some sort of assessment and accreditation process? Okay. And they are, and we all know they are hoops that have to be jumped. They are not necessarily fun or exciting hoops to jump. They are important, however, and ideally, the assessment accreditation process provides an opportunity for faculty to come together with administrators and say, this is what we're trying to do, this is where we want our students to be. And with all due respect for the administrators in the room, and I really do mean that, with all due respect for the administrators in here, faculty, I'm talking to you for just a second, assessment is too damned important to be left up to the suits. It is simply too damned important to be left up to the suits. Now, I don't necessarily mean the suits in this room. You are coming from your discipline. You know stuff about what we're talking about. But you know what? At my college, my dean, I like my dean very much. He comes from the Department of Art. He is a ceramicist. He should not be part of the conversation about what we want our students to learn in political science. And he's not. But here's the thing. If the political scientists, the ones who are best qualified to talk about that, if we don't come forward and lead that conversation, then the suits are going to have to do it. And our provost and our deans and all of the suit-wearing people who make far more money than me and seem to have less fun doing what they're doing than me, they're going to have to get involved in these conversations. Assessment accreditation provides a wonderful opportunity for faculty to be part of these conversations about what we want our students to learn. General education, probably less applicable for a college like yours. For my college, my department, which very much is doing service courses for our gen ed program, it's a very relevant piece. Program review, I don't know how it works at Wayne, but at our college, any departments that go through outside accreditation don't have to do a program review process, so they sort of overlap. Recruitment and retention of faculty. How do you hire? How do you think about teaching and learning in the hiring process? Does a commitment to teaching, does a commitment to being part of a team that aims to educate students matter? Job candidates in our department teach classes. We talk to them at length about their teaching and about their teaching goals in the department. We emphasize to them teaching matters to us. When teaching never comes up during a job interview, don't be surprised if you end up hiring candidates who don't think about teaching as a key part of their job. And finally, tenure and promotion. Tenure and promotion is, of course, very big, particularly if you don't have it, and if you do. Right? Tenure and promotion matters a lot. It provides opportunities in this context for departments, for colleges to think about what do we want the standards to be? How will we count this stuff? I've been very fortunate at Eastern. I have been extraordinarily fortunate at Eastern that the work that I do in the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning counts. That people look at it and say, that scholarship, that counts, we can tenure him on it. These are discussions for your college to have. These are discussions with department heads and deans to think about how we count this, how we value it. I would make the argument that if you want to get this type of work to be considered valid and to count for tenure and promotion, then a large part means showing the value. Going to a dean, going to a department head and saying, I've done this work on the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, and look how it has fed into student learning. That makes it hard for a dean to say, forget it, we're tossing it out. But it then becomes up to those of us who are doing this work to say, here's how we've completed the loop. Here's how we've taken the work we've done in teaching and learning and brought it back to our classroom and to our students. All right. How do we avoid making our classes and our universities be seen merely as commodities? Right? How do we avoid the situation where students are just, taking our classes at community college because it's cheaper? Right? We certainly have that challenge at Eastern. A lot of it, to me, comes down to being able to show and to demonstrate that our commitment to teaching, our commitment to investigating teaching, and to bringing these best practices back into the classroom can do that a lot. Let me walk through some of the disciplinary reasons here for doing this work. David Pace's comment here, I've sort of talked about pieces of this, right? To understand clearly as possible the kinds of thinking that students have to do in each academic field, to devise strategies for introducing students to these mental operations as effectively as possible. Right? I think in many ways that's what we do, and I think David's comment that this is the core of the scholarship of teaching and learning, it resonates with me. Right? What do we want our students to learn? We have them for a certain number of years in whatever program they're in. Where do we want them to be at the end? What's the best way to get them there? Bob Bain, who's working in the field of history, talks also about how a lot of the work of the scholarship of teaching and learning comes from making visible what is invisible. One of the things I've learned from years of doing this, we ask students at the end of the day to give us a finished product. That finished product is polished, it's nice, it's lovely, it's pretty, it's beautiful. However, sometimes what's even more valuable to us is to watch the process by which they get there. Many of you, no doubt, particularly I would imagine if you're working in the lab and having these very frequent conversations with your students, many of you get that experience. I get it a little bit less often. And therefore, I try in my own work to find as many opportunities as I can to make that happen. I like to think and worry about bottlenecks. Where do students get stuck? Where are the moments that students get stuck in what they're doing? I'm going to move through this next part just a little bit quicker than I had planned because I want to leave a little bit more time at the end to tie this together.